Welcome to the Intentional Athlete Podcast, where strength is more than a number on the bar. I'm your host, Ross Leppala, powerlifter, coach, and co-creator of the Intentional Athlete Experience. This show is for lifters, movers, and seekers who know that what happens in the gym echoes into your life. We explore how to train with purpose, live with clarity, and channel the pursuit of strength into something deeper, something transformative. Each episode, we'll dive into conversation, tools, and insights that help you align your mindset, body, and spirit. Because real growth doesn't just happen under the barbell. It happens in your mind, in your breath, and in your choices. This is about more than just PRs. This is about presence, power, and progress that lasts. Welcome to the journey, my friend. Welcome to the Intentional Athlete Podcast. Hey, what's up, my friend? Welcome back to the Intentional Athlete Podcast. Today, we got a special guest on the show, Gary Chupik. Gary is the founder and creator of Elite Mindset and brings a ton of really cool experience to the conversation. I'm really excited to share that with you. Gary's worked with a ton of high-level people. He's worked in the NFL. He's worked in the MLB. He's worked with business coaches and business entrepreneurs. So it's not just about athletics and the pursuit of athletics. It's mental mindset stuff that's going to help you be a stronger version of yourself on and off the platform, in life, in training, in whatever your pursuits are. Because what we do here, what we do with our mind is really powerful and helps us show up as our best selves wherever we are. But it all starts with our mindset, and we can change that. We can address that. When we train with intentionality, that's the point. That's what we're doing. We're developing those skills, applying them to our training, and then thinking, hey, how does it apply to my life? And then boom, we can show up as a better, stronger version of ourselves on and off the platform. So let's dive in. Gary Chupik, my friend, how you doing today?
I'm doing so well. Thank you very much.
Yeah, fantastic, man. I'm really looking forward to this. We were just chatting a bit about some cool stuff before we started recording, and man, there's a lot we can get into. But before we get too far down that rabbit hole, just how about a little introduction? Who's Gary? Where are you from? What do you do? Just to set a baseline for people that may not know who you are.
Sure, people might be underwhelmed, but I'm a mental performance coach from Seattle, Washington, and I grew up in Canada, so I'm a dual citizen. And I unlock people and potential in athletes and more and more in the business world. I can't believe it. But most of my work was done in the athletic world. But yeah, more and more people in business are finding out that the common traits that it takes to be excellent in athletics are applicable to business. And so there's probably about an 80% commonality between those traits. And then the other 20%, I might have to learn the particular sport or the business, but a lot of it is there. And so when we talk about what it takes to be resilient and powerful and amazing in sports, it might take emotional regulation. It might take your self-talk. It might take your focus. It might take all sorts of things. But I could have said the same things for business owners and business leaders. And so, yeah, there's a lot of commonality. And so I would say 50% of my work is done with professional athletes, and then the other 50% would be in businesses, which I never expected.
Right. But that's really neat and a cool correlation that when you're working on these mindset things, it is allowing the person to show up more powerfully in whatever their pursuit is, whether that be in athletics or in business or at home with their family.
You got it. Yeah, like my ability to refocus myself when I walk through the front door of my home with my wife and my families, it's pretty important, I would say, and probably no less important than doing my job really well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What about since you primarily work and your target has been mindset with athletics and athletes, what's your like athletic background? What did you do play growing up that kind of has you focused more on the athletic realm than say the business realm?
Well, the primary influence was growing up in a family of five boys, where sitting around the table was competitive.
Yeah, for sure.
Just to eat anything was competitive. But yeah, that's probably my primary influence. But I played a little bit of hockey and a little bit of high school football and a tiny little bit of college football. It wasn't very good, but football in Canada was second thought to hockey.
Yeah.
Um, that was probably where I did a lot of my yeah, that's where a lot of my influence came from. But I've always enjoyed working out. Like that's been a part of my life for such a long time. And I've probably been going off to the gym probably for the last 15 years, mostly on, I would say off and on for about 20 or 25, but being pretty serious about it for the last 15 years. So the discipline of getting up at 3:45 a.m. and even if I'm injured or I'm not well, just the discipline of showing up sometimes is the win. It is the progress, just showing up. And so I find great joy and a little bit of pride, personal pride, in showing up even when I don't want to. But that's just a normal part of my life now. And I think when you want to be really good at something, it requires consistency and
Hmm.
repetition. And I think something I teach called the illusion of choice. And the illusion of choice is that if you want to be average at something, I think you give yourself lots of choices. Think of the
Hmm.
menu at the Cheesecake Factory or something like that. If you want to be good at something, you have a few choices. But if you want to be elite or really outstanding at something, you kind of have no choice. This is the way that you need to live your life. And for me, I think being at my very best means that I'm pushing myself in the gym. And so it's probably 70% mental being in the gym and probably 30% physical for me.
Yeah. Interesting. I like that illusion of choice because it's kind of, I suppose, contrary to one of the things that I talk about a lot with the power of choice and how
Mm.
when we realize we have a choice in how we show up and pursue life, sports, athletics, that gives us the power. And but I also like your spin on it and the illusion of choice because then a lot of times people might choose the excuse of not getting up to go to the gym when they're supposed to go to the gym or something along those lines. So obviously, like many things, there is the dichotomy in the spectrum that can exist, and depends on how you yield that tool.
Agreed. And I think the illusion is that if you want to be, let's say, finishing the top 10 or the top five or even win an award or a trophy, the illusion is that you can give yourself lots of choices to get there. And the truth of the matter is that you can't. And if, like, for example, I had an athlete that I was working with who was in a competition of about 100 people. And so he finished in 13th, I think it was. And just, I said, just for fun, when it came to your nutrition the week before your race or your competition, uh, if it was like on a scale of 1 to 100, what place would you have finished in your nutrition? And he gave this, I can't remember exactly, but it was something like I would have finished in 35th or something like that. And I was like, oh, okay. And so when it comes to your hydration, what number would you have given yourself? Oh, maybe about 19th. And then I said, well, when it comes to sleep, what would you have given yourself? And he goes, well, probably 40th or 50th. I'm like, so you finished in 13th, but you prepared as if you would have finished in like 30th or 25th. I said, you did pretty good, but just imagine how you could have finished if you would have prepared the way that you wanted to finish. And the illusion of choice is, yeah, you gave yourself a lot of choices, but imagine if, like, don't expect to be a champion if you don't prepare like one. And that's the illusion that's there.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. You have to balance that with being disciplined, and I can very much relate to that.
Hmm.
What about you work in the mindset? What attracted you to that? So you played sports. To me, I often think that there's something that attracted you to the mindset of coaching and not like the sets and the reps or the technique and stuff like that. So what about your like life story brought you onto the mental side of things?
Yeah, it's probably found in a very strange place. So I grew up in Canada, just
Hmm.
north of Minnesota, and it was cold in the winter and hot and windy in the summer. But in the winters, I know it was just a little tight, but back in the day when we used to put the newspaper in the mailbox, outside of a person's door, I mean, it didn't matter what the weather was. It didn't matter how cold it was. We just had to deliver the newspaper and that. And so I got used to the coldest weather imaginable, and my eyelashes would freeze together delivering the newspaper. So it was like just put one step in front of another, just kind of keep going. And then when I got a little bit older and I began to play football, man, come October, man, it was snow on the ground. And I don't know if you've ever played like sports in the snow, but it
Yes.
hurts when you get hit, right? So I just was like, hey, wait a minute. This is an opportunity for me to go hit people because people don't want to be hit. And in football, it's either hit or be hit. There's nothing in between.
True.
So I was like, well, I'm going to start like dishing out punishment here. And so it was a lot of, I thought the snow was so much fun, but it was such a mental thing. And it was a stance that I took playing high school football that this was my opportunity to shine in the most difficult moments. And so I think that had a huge role to play. Those two things had huge roles to play in just my mentality. So I was never the biggest, never the fastest, never the best, but I was captain of our football team. And I could look back at it and say, well, it was probably because of my mentality that put me there. And I even wasn't the smartest guy on the field, but I think just that mentality to be at my very best and find opportune moments to be who I was, and take advantage of the situations when other people didn't want to be there was my superpower. So I think the transition from being a young adult to, and a lot of people don't know this about me, but I was a pastor growing up in my
Okay.
early 20s, 30s, and
Yeah.
even 40s. So I've been an ordained pastor for 28 years
Gotcha.
and almost 30 years actually.
Okay.
And so my primary way of helping people was not telling them who to be and what to do. It was actually inviting and coaching them and asking, hey, what do you think your next best steps are? And maybe giving a bunch of different options about how you want to react in this situation and then letting you go make those choices. And so I was never into the telling, I was much more into coaching. So I think combining the coaching and with my desire to help people and then the mentality piece, it was just the perfect fit.
Gotcha. Gotcha. That's definitely that's fun. Do you still ordain? Do you still minister?
I'm still ordained, and it's funny. A lot of people ask me if will I go back into ministry, and I say I'm already in it. Like
Okay.
I love what I do.
Right.
I'm not presently working within the four walls of the church,
Hmm.
doing that kind of ministry, but for me, I do something called the game plan for life now, and it's like I have a playbook for the mind, but I also have a game plan to live a high performance life. And so that's a 2 day sit down that I have with clients that either fly to Seattle or they fly me to where they are. So I can do the mindset stuff, the mental performance stuff, and I do the how to live a high performance lifestyle. And I kind of feel like, man, like I, knowing your identity is like the most important thing that you can ever do. Because if you go be you, you're not being somebody else, and you're doing things that are native to your personality and your identity. So I do what I call identity based mental performance, because if I superimpose what works for one person onto another person, then that oftentimes doesn't work. There are some fundamentals like 1 + 1 is 2, like there are those,
Right.
but there's a lot of nuance involved in all those things. And so to know your identity and know your purpose, which is different, and knowing your calling, which is different,
Right.
and knowing the vision that you have for your life is different yet, and knowing your strategy and how to accomplish those things based on your personality is different yet, and having a personal philosophy is different yet. And so to help people articulate those things with precision, I think is really important. And so for me, when we talk about doing ministry, I kind of feel like, my identity hasn't changed,
Hmm.
my purpose hasn't changed, my calling hasn't changed, but the one thing that has changed is my assignment.
Yeah.
And so my current assignment is being a mental performance coach, and this classroom that I'm in right now in life is really a fun one.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I really like that. I often think about like the expression of that purpose and the thing that you're really trying to do. You can do it from a lot of different vehicles. When
Mhm.
I stopped engineering and started coaching powerlifting full time, I had this realization that it's not coaching powerlifting that really drives me. If powerlifting went away today, I would find a different vehicle to do what I do, which
Yes.
is
Yeah.
essentially coaching and finding ways
Exactly.
to be connected with a person in a way that allows me to help them show up as a better version of themselves. This just happens to be
Exactly.
through the pursuit of powerlifting. And
I
so
love it.
it's fantastic to hear that that sounds similar for you from ministry into elite mindset coaching.
Same thing. Yeah, exactly identical. Yeah, because I think sometimes we'll say, well, I'm called to, be a powerlifting coach, or I'm called to, a church ministry. Or no, you're not. No, you're not. You're not called to that. I think that is your current assignment, and your assignment may change over time.
Yeah.
But you have some attributes and some identity and some purposes and callings that are, like, for example, like for me, my identity is just who I am, but my purpose is to glorify God with my life. My calling is to unlock people and potential in people. And the vision that I have for my life is to have a generational impact. My current assignment, that can always change.
Yeah.
And it has changed, but that feels like I'm more aligned today than I ever have been, and for that I'm really joyful.
Yeah. Fantastic. Question for you. How do you identify if somebody's identity is the source of their limitation? Because I look at
Mm,
that as like a lot of times the way a person identifies with himself can sometimes be unhealthy, sometimes not.
sure.
And being able to identify whether that attachment is unhealthy and unguided and undirected, how do you go about navigating something like that?
Yeah, that's such a good question, and it's highly nuanced in my world. So the idea of discovering who you are and your identity, like in its purest form, that's pretty crucial to do that. And it takes a level of surrender, I think, to say, okay, this is just who I am,
Yeah.
strengths and weaknesses and all. So there's that. But your belief in yourself is definitely associated with your sense of identity, but they're different. So a good way to describe it is this, and I'm going to share with you something it took me about 7 years to figure out, and I just figured it out a couple of years ago, but
Right.
I played with it for this long, and so it really is like what's the physics equation to mindset? Like if mindset was a physics equation, what would it look like? And so
The engineer in me
exactly.
has peak interest right now.
Yeah. So let me know if I'm wrong. I'm definitely open to adjusting it and actually being shown that I'm wrong, or it could be adjusted in some way. But where does mindset come from? Well, the general definition of mindset on a broader scale is a conditioned set of beliefs, typically about yourself, that drive your behavior. And pretty general, helpful, I guess, in a kind of a broad way, but it's much more detailed than that. So here's what I've come up with. So most of our mindsets come from an experience that we've had in the past. So you have an experience. So this is where the engineering piece comes in, or physics piece. You put a pair of brackets right after the word experience, and then you have thoughts and feelings that are associated with that experience. So, thoughts and feelings. If you're younger, you can't really control those. Your thoughts are your thoughts, and your feelings were your feelings, and something might have happened to you, or you might have initiated that thing. But in some way, shape, or form, it was an experience. So that you have an experience that you have thoughts and feelings about, and then add a plus sign outside of those parentheses, and you have your response. So you get to choose, especially when you get older, but you get to choose your response to the thoughts and feelings about the experience that you had. So you get to choose. But beyond that, if you add another plus sign, you have a belief. Now I've created a belief about myself because I've responded a certain way, that I have thoughts and feelings about an experience that I had. So now you created a belief about yourself. And if you take all of that and you add some square parentheses around that, it equals a mindset.
Hmm.
And that's where mindset comes from. But it doesn't
Gotcha.
end there, which is really interesting, because what it must result in, and this is what Andy McKay from the Seattle Mariners told me. He goes, Gary, it's really great, but you're missing something. I was like, great, tell me. He goes, a new mindset must result in new and improved behaviors.
Mm.
And he goes, because if it stops at the mindset, but it doesn't have an expression, or it doesn't have a behavior or an action associated with it, it's falling short. And I was like, that is just so brilliant. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, wait a minute, a new and improved behavior is kind of like, and circle back to the word experience. It's like a new experience that you're giving yourself. which has new and improved thoughts and behaviors, which has a new and improved response, that has a new and improved belief about yourself, has results in a new and improved mindset, and then it cycles it back around.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it makes sense to anybody else but me, but I think it's phenomenal because when you talk about identity and you talk about belief and you talk about like, okay, so our identity is pretty hardwired into us. It's not 100%, but it's pretty hardwired. But what do I believe about myself and what I've gone through that is perhaps holding me back or is an obstacle? Because somewhere down the line, and I hate to say this because I'm not, I don't always love the Freudian aspect of psychology, but somewhere down the line, something happened.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine who's a counselor, her and I were going through this process, and I was explaining to her the process, and she goes, "Well, what happened?" I'm like, "What are you talking about? What happened?" Like, I'm not one of those guys that's going to dwell in the past too much, but she said, "Well, what happened?" And I'm like, "I don't know what happened." And she says, "Somewhere along the way, something happened that you had a response to that made you who you are today, or maybe there's a hang up that I'm experiencing." And I was like, "Well, wait a minute. I think there is something." And I couldn't believe it. I was just as much in shock as anybody. And I said, "Well, I had this prof in high school who I somehow I found myself in geotrade. I don't even know what geotrade is, but I was in geotrade. I was not smart enough to be in that room. But in the 11th grade, I was in geotrade and I sat at the front. I remember clearly, front right, the wood table that you could write on
Yeah.
the desk. I snuck in there, and my prof didn't like athletes, especially football players. So I didn't do very well in this class, but he loved to pick on me because I was a football player. So he was pretty mean to me. He would know that I didn't have the answer for number 7, but he would ask me anyway. So he would say, "Gary, what'd you get for number 7?" And he knew full well that I didn't know the answer to it. So I would joke and I would say, "Well, this is really easy, Mr. Watson." His name really was Mr. Watson. I said, "Oh, this is really easy, Mr. Watson. It's 7.9873642109734333." And the entire class would laugh and he would get really mad because I showed him up, but that I didn't know what else to do. So I had an experience that I had thoughts and feelings about.
Mm-hmm.
And my response was to be funny. Now, was I a class clown? Definitely not. I was not a class, but I didn't know how to respond at that stage. So I tried to be funny. Well, the belief that I created about myself, and you can only guess what that would be, was that I wasn't very smart. So my
Mm.
belief was that I probably wasn't very smart. And what was my mindset? I better not go to college because I'm not smart enough to go to college. Now, and here's where it gets really powerful, for at least for me.
Yeah.
If I could be the invisible man and I could walk up to myself in that classroom and whisper in my own ear to coach myself, what would I tell myself in that moment? Now, what would my 56-year-old self tell my 16-year-old self? And I would probably whisper this. I would probably say, "Hey, Gary, did you know that there are 11 different kinds of intelligence and geotrade's not yours?" And I probably would have whispered that to myself. And then I would have said to myself, "Hey, Gary, you're really good at philosophy and ethics and morality. And so do they offer those classes, or psychology? Do they offer those classes in high school?" They didn't offer any of those classes in high school. They did in college, but they didn't in high school. So here I thought that I just wasn't a very smart person, but I go to college and then I go for my master's degree and I get high honors. So I just about got derailed by my own mindset. But it was definitely a belief that I had about myself. It wasn't necessary. I mean, knowing my identity was really important, and having people reflect back to me what they saw in me was really important. But I think also just kind of like hanging in there. And, I ended up on a whim going to college, and I'm really glad that I did.
Yeah, definitely. Most definitely. So I want to come back to that equation. I want to pluck at it for a minute.
Please do.
Not that it's wrong, but
Hmm.
to expand on it.
Sure.
It's not a linear equation. It's a differential
Hmm.
equation.
Say more.
What I mean by that is the variable, like the thought or the feeling, is also variable. Like
Hmm.
it's a multi-layered variable,
Hmm.
which so you have the experience. The experience is what the experience is. That's a constant. That's the one thing that doesn't change. Like your experience with your Professor Watson, that's a real experience. It happened. But what you think about it, how you interpret it from a thought process standpoint, you can change,
Hmm.
right? And so there's where it comes when you're talking about not agreeing with like the Freudian psychology of it, and you can go down the Adler psychology of it. Is what meaning you apply to it based on your perspective and interpretation. And if we bring in Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, your thoughts can create a different emotional response in your body and change how you perceive and experience or re-experience the something like that, so that when you're moving forward you can create and contribute to the experience differently moving forward, thusly integrating in a delta, in a change, to show up with different behaviors and different mindsets, and that's that evolution of change. And to me, like, that's one of the things that a lot of people I think miss in mental health and psychology is the how to integrate part, so that way we're not sitting there reliving an experience in the same way. We're integrating to be able to change and move forward. And I think this ties into with your pillar analogy that you were talking about before we started recording. So I think that's a really cool way to like touch on those pillars. And I don't want to steal that because that's more up your lane. So why don't you explain what those pillars are?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I appreciate that input. And yes, the more conscious we are of our thoughts, the more that we can reframe them.
Yep.
So I'm talking about something that happened way in the past, but we can reframe them in the present,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Going backwards. And so that I call that self-coaching. We can self-coach our own thoughts and our own feelings. And but in the present moment, you're absolutely right. It's like if we can like catch ourselves and be conscientious of the thoughts that we're feeling, and then we can reframe them right on in the moment. So I think that's brilliant, outstanding. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were talking about what I called a mental health bridge assessment, and talking about maybe the shortcomings of mental health in its present form throughout
Mm-hmm.
our culture and society, which is oftentimes mental health kind of stops at the coping pillar. So there's four pillars, and on the far right we have the crisis pillar. So we're identifying people who are in crisis as a helper, let's say, as a counselor or a coach, and let's say they're going through some type of crisis, and so we can say, oh, they're in crisis mode, and so how do we help bridge them to the next pillar, which is coping? And so there's some identifications of what it's like when someone is in on the coping pillar. And I think that's where most, not all, but most mental health stops,
Mm-hmm.
is once I get out of that crisis to coping, I'm good. When in reality, there's two more pillars. And so again, there's a bridge to the third pillar, which is the thriving pillar. And then there are more mechanisms to cross the bridge to the transcendent or the transcending pillar, which is sort of a convergence of who you are, your identity, your experiences, all of your thoughts, and you're actually putting those things into action in a meaningful way in your life. And so my hope is that people don't stop at the coping pillar, that there's so much more to life than just coping.
What's the actual bridging process?
So they're different from going to each pillar.
Okay.
So, for example, let's say someone is in crisis. So, how do we help someone cross the bridge? Well, you certainly, number one, you're going to simplify life, right? Or simplify what they need to do. You're going to encourage them to invite someone to their table to get help. So, it involves an invitation to get help, hopefully, that they respond to.
Mm-hmm.
And then number three, you want to be able to give them a little bit of an action plan, because they're in that place, they're not thinking clearly. And so when you give them structure of what they need to do, and have a plan, it actually is very helpful for them. And the more crisis that they're feeling, and in fact, as a chaplain for the Seattle Thunderbirds for 7 years, and then in the hospital domain for a couple of years, it's like the more crisis that they feel that they're in, the more directive that we can be in helping them sort of like, say, hey, here's the steps of what we need to do together. So that's going from crisis to coping. And then from coping to thriving, it might be self-discovery. It might be, helping them understand who they are. There's also, it's like, helping them discover what their purpose and their calling is.
Mm-hmm.
And then in that final bridge toward transcending, it's like, so why are you here? Like how can you pour your life out so you're a blessing and an encouragement to the people around you? And so there's sort of like this transcending piece where you say, how do I build community? How do I involve other people with what I'm doing? How do I help them maximize and optimize their lives? And it's a really wonderful place to be when you can live on that last pillar.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that you brought it, that like some of that ending point of transcending is back to community, because I definitely really in totality believe that when we're in that pursuit of that purpose and we're transcending a higher meaning, a big part of that is your bucket's full. Now it's time to use that to nourish your community and those around you, because your bucket's full. It's plentiful. It's time to share your gifts with the world and the people around you. And then a lot of times, if we're in that right place and we're in that right mindset, just the act of giving that gift away just fills the bucket in and of itself, and it becomes almost as though it's an endless spring or an endless bucket that just always replenishes itself as you're giving to other people, and just the act of giving fills your bucket back up, and I think it's really powerful.
Yeah, and what's really special about this is it's like I've tried to find a way to balance, how much do I focus on myself and how much do I focus on other people? And I've created something, since I love to create. I created something called the SFO principle, which is self for others. In other
Mm-hmm.
words, take care of yourself so well. Like it's permission to like dial into you and focus on yourself and your own growth. Focus on you. So uh, focus on yourself so that you can love other people.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to get, 2 hours sleep, I don't know about you, but I don't do very well, Ross, when I only have 2 hours sleep. I'm not very loving, I'm impatient, all that stuff. My wife knows this full well.
Yeah.
But if I'm taking care of myself, I'm an intentional. It's actually an act of love for me to go to bed on time. It's an act of
Yeah.
love because I'm better for the people around me. So it gives me permission to really focus on my own mental and physical health. And I think it's a really wonderful way to look at all this.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. And don't come around me when I'm not sleeping well. Unless you come bearing free cups of coffee.
Yeah,
Stay away.
agreed.
Yep. So these pillars and bridging them, how do they benefit and improve athletic performance?
Oh, wonderful question. Wow. I don't know if anyone's ever asked me that question before.
I
Yeah,
love
so
I love when I get responses like
yeah,
that,
you
when I
got
ask
it.
questions that guests have never gotten before.
You
Yes.
pegged it. Well, where this integrates into the mental performance stuff for me is when I'm working. So the best always want to get better. Pete Carroll from Seattle Seahawks, coach of the Seattle Seahawks at the time, said, Gary, the best always want to get better. And, Russell Wilson and Trevor Moawad, his mental performance coach, Trevor Moawad, um, you know, how many days did they talk a year? It was 365. And you say to yourself, well, wait a minute, I thought coaching sessions were once a week or once every couple of weeks or once a month or check in every quarter. Listen, at the highest levels of performance, the best always want to be coached. They want to stay sharp. And so figuring out how to stay sharp, like I have this saying, like iron sharpens iron, but only at the right angle. And you got
Yeah.
to figure out what the right angle is to help somebody. So this idea that mental performance coaches and mindsets only for people who aren't doing very well, it's so not true.
Agreed.
Not true at all. Michael Jordan had Tim Grover in his face every single day. Russell Wilson, 7-time or 8-time Pro Bowler, Super Bowl champion, mental performance coach in his face every single day. Like, this is how these guys want to live. So this idea that, like, I'm good, I don't really need the coaching piece, like I don't really need that,
Crock of
it's
shit.
baloney. It's just not true.
Yeah.
So when I'm working with someone, but I am assessing which pillar they're on. So if I'm working with someone and they're in crisis, maybe they're in a slump or maybe things aren't going well, now I say, okay, what do I need to do to bridge them to the next pillar? And I will come up with a plan for them. So it's in my head, I'm identifying where I think they are. Or I'll say, sounds like you're in crisis. Yeah, you would. This is really important to me because if I don't do well, it affects my career. So yeah, I'm in crisis, and my
Yeah.
head is in the future because I have a contract negotiation coming up, and it's not going to go well, and I'm in trouble. Like, there's millions of dollars at stake. So they're already living in the future. So they feel as if, whether regardless of what I feel, but they feel as if they are in crisis mode. So I can address that, right? Because now I know how to bridge them over to the coping. So now we can talk about coping. But some athletes will be in the coping space, but they're not thriving. So I can help them get to the thriving pillar and then onto the transcending. And I think just identifying where people are at, or where athletes are at in their mental game or in their physical game,
Hmm.
is just super helpful. Because that way, I just talk about um, mental performance in generic terms, like, oh, have you practiced mindfulness? Have you tried this? Have you tried improving your self-talk? Well, maybe that's not what they need. So if I really am listening well to how they think they're doing, then I can apply the right remedy for whatever it is that they find challenging. And I think that's really important because if we're going to apply a certain remedy, oftentimes those remedies, they might be the right remedy at the wrong time.
Right.
And so it loses its efficacy. It's like taking an antibiotic when you don't need it,
Yeah.
but you should just take them when you need it. And so to identify exactly where that athlete is that is really the skill of a great sports psychologist or mental performance coach.
Right. That makes sense. What does it look like from a outcome based perspective for lifters out there that might be listening? What does it look like when a lifter or an athlete bridges from that thriving to transcending? Like, what does it
Mhm.
look like in terms of their performance and how they're able to show up in their given sport?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think they're very locked in to being like fully manifesting, or I call it living out of the overflow of who they are. So let's say they're in that, coping or thriving, but they're not quite yet at the transcending. Um, I think what it looks like is their ability to share their wisdom
Mm.
and with other people and create that community. And ultimately, you're never going very far alone anyway.
Yeah.
So for you to have a level of, I know it sounds crazy, but for you to have a level of vulnerability, so that, I mean, realizing that you might be all that in a bag of chips, like you might be really good, but you've got more levels in you.
Yeah.
And so to see an athlete that's at the thriving pillar move on to the transcending, they're pushing themselves in new and in different ways. In other words, what they're doing is, even though they have all these rhythms or habits or disciplines in their life, they're creating these helpful pattern interrupts to keep them sharp. So it's like, well, what's the pattern interrupt here? Like, what can we do to just sort of change things up? Not a lot, because they have the rhythm, that those rhythms and disciplines that have made them successful to get to where they are. But what are one or two slight variances that we can add, or those pattern interrupts that we can add, so that they stay fresh and
Yeah.
they stay sharp, so that they can keep learning and it's like amazing. Like, you can go to the gym, and I remember at one point I was, you do all the different bicep exercises, but every now and again you learn a bicep exercise that stresses a certain part of the muscle that you didn't know that you had. You're like, oh, wait a minute, there's unfound gain here. if I work this part of the muscle, and I never do it,
Yeah.
doing all the exercises I'm doing. So that little bit of a pattern interrupt, you actually can find gain in the strangest places. And that's how I would help someone.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I, I should share a story with you real quick because I know most of my listeners are power lifters. The thing that I couldn't help but think about from the way I've experienced the way you're talking about your pillars is last year as I was pursuing the Masters World Championship and I get to the meet and I've been thriving in a lot of different ways. And in that meet, there was nothing but confidence in my ability to perform. I was in my athletic flow state. I was locked in from a vision of what I was about to create. And what I was about to create was a win at the World Championship that I had already won 1,000 times in my head over the years of preparing for that moment. And I win. It's great, awesome, cool. Who doesn't like to win? But the second I step off the platform, I start going, what's next? And not
Mm,
necessarily from a what's next from an accomplishment standpoint. What can I continue to do on a powerlifting platform and weights and loads? It's like what's really next? Like how do I use this vehicle to continue to give back and
mm,
be with people and contribute to the elevation of
so
not
good.
just myself but the sport and everybody? And like that's that transcendence. And so I couldn't help but want to share like a very detailed experience of how that was for me because it's like in short it's just fucking cool to get
Yeah.
to that point because there's lots of years of struggle that I've get to that's taken me to get to that point.
Yeah. 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 It's such a healthy question. I know that there is maybe a line of thinking that might be, always pushing, always, always asking what's next. And I don't know. I think there's something really healthy about that. I really do. Like, I like to listen to Jordan Peterson, and he said the worst day of the year or two for him is the day after he finishes writing a book.
Mm,
And it's like, now what? Like, I've just
yeah,
climbed this huge mountain, and now what do I do?
yeah,
And he said, the longer I don't have my next thing, the more depressed or discouraged I get.
mm,
And I love the fact that he could just sort of acknowledge that and surrender to that and say, what's next? And
yeah,
it's okay. And it can be hard or it can be easy or whatever it is, but
yeah,
I do have a what's next. And I think there's something really powerful about that. I just listened to a golfer this morning talking about winning a major golf tournament just this morning. And he said, I won the tournament. It was the accumulation of years and years and years. First time he held the trophy above his head. And he said he went home for dinner that night and with his two kids and his wife. And he said everything was just normal. Like it was like he thought that he would feel different or he would achieve something. And I'm sure that he did to a certain extent. There was a type of joy and relief from
yeah,
winning. But even him, he was just like, okay, what's next? Like, well, now what?
yeah,
And he just never imagined that he would be asking himself that question in that moment. It's maybe something that you can only experience.
yeah, for sure, for sure. It's definitely wild to be in the pursuit of something for so long and then it actually happens and it's like whoa, I did it. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's definitely that moment of like emptiness and of what's next. And honestly, I think about, my experience just because it's the easiest to relate to. And it, it was never the thing that was most meaningful to me about that was it wasn't validating in that I didn't need it to validate who I am and what I'm doing. And that was like to me as well the transcending piece of what created the space for there to be nothing and be okay with that and just ponder and ask myself an honest question of what's next rather than feeling like I need to do more.
Yeah, it's theoretically I'm in wholeheartedly agreement with you. And I have felt that for my own life. And yet the human side of me is I do feel the need to be validated. Like for me, it was having Russell Wilson's mental performance coach, Trevor Moad, who said, "Hey Gary, if you're going to help a professional athlete, show me your system, show me your process."
Yeah.
And at that time, Trevor Moad, he was at the top of Mount Everest. There's nobody better in America. He was on ESPN. He was on TV shows. He was getting paid $40,000 per speech. I mean, he was the top of the line.
Yeah.
Alabama, Miami Dolphins. Like there was nobody
Yeah.
bigger. And yet for him to say to Gary Chupik, "Hey, wow, like your process is really good.
Yeah.
We need to hire you."
Yeah.
Like, what kind of validation is that? I mean, are you kidding me? Like that made me feel pretty darn good. And yet, I think for the first few months I was like, oh, I'm pretty good. This is pretty good. But then I realized, no, I got a long way to go, bro. Like this is just starting. Like, are you kidding me? But then you start, it's funny. Like I had a chance to speak at Google and the FBI recently, and you just think, wow, like 2 or 3 years ago, like if I would have imagined myself, speaking to those groups, like what would that be like? I would have thought that I would have died and gone to heaven. Like that's the
Yeah.
pinnacle, and yet it isn't. It's
Yeah.
really not. I don't feel like I came home both of those times just feeling like, okay, what's next? Right? Like I don't even really blink much about it. So
The
now
next,
I'm thinking about like how do I share myself and share what I know with other people? And how do I invite people to the table where we can experience something together?
yeah,
And because doing it without community is not that fun.
agreed. It's the next set of four pillars,
Yeah, very well said.
right?
Very true.
So I know we have a bit of a time limit here, so I want to make sure we get you out on time. But so I have one last question for you, because this is the intentional athlete, and my big belief is we are people first, we are humans first, and athletes second. And we take care of the person takes care of the athlete. But it can happen the other way around too. Like we can learn how to take care of the athlete first, and then the athlete know how to take care of the person, and it can be this bit of a cycle when we do it with intentionality. And so I'm a big believer in what we're doing in our pursuit of athletics needs to not just up level our athletics, but up level our life. How do you see your work that you're doing up level the lives of those individuals, of those athletes, and how, like, is that performance dual supportive?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'd like to think that it is like when I talk about having a playbook for the mind and a game plan for life. If you get your if you get your mind right, like if you start to sort of think between the thriving and transcending, sort of in that range, when you start to live there in your mind, it's pretty powerful. Like I've identified 9 different domains in life, and when you start letting that mindset overflow and living out of that overflow into all the different domains of your life, it's a pretty it's a pretty ecstatic way to live your life, a pretty wonderful way.
Yeah,
And I think so I think that mindset rolls over into the life. And then when you see people thriving in life, I don't know if there's anything better. Like I say, I want the fruit of my life to grow on other people's trees, and if I can get there, that's a pretty wonderful life.
yeah, man. I totally agree with that. It's definitely fantastic, in my opinion, as well, when our athletic pursuits up level all the areas of our life, and we can do that with our mind, and we can do that
Great.
when we train that with intentionality. So I appreciate your time, Gary. How can people find you if they'd like to connect with you?
Oh, thank you for asking. My business name is Elite Mindset, and my website is elitemindsetnation.com because I want to create a nation of servant leaders, high performers, courageous risk takers. And so that's kind of my passion. And I will be starting a community. I think it's going to be September 1st. You're probably the first to know about it. I haven't really told anybody.
Fantastic.
So that'll be on School, SKOOL. It'll be the Elite Mindset community, and then I'm on Instagram. People want to find me there. It's Elite Mindset. I'm the guy with the blue verification dot.
Awesome. Well, Gary, I definitely appreciate your time, and I'll be sure we can get those web addresses and things of that nature and put them up in the show notes so people can find it with ease. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.